My boy and his roommate are secretly in love. He is 22, studying design in Chicago. On October 23rd, an electrical fire gutted their apartment. They lost almost everything, taking $8,000 in property damage. I told them to pack what survived into a rental and come stay in Milwaukee. They arrived exhausted and jittery. For the first few days, they played the bro act perfectly, keeping a careful, measured distance. But by the second week, the cracks started showing. It started on Tuesday. I was helping Ethan set up Wi-Fi on his replacement phone. A text notification flashed from Noah. It read, "Hurry up and come back upstairs. My feet are freezing." Ethan snatched the phone so fast, he shattered a water glass on the linoleum. He babbled an excuse and bolted upstairs. On Thursday, I was in the basement washing their smoke-scented clothes. I checked the pockets of Noah's winter coat. I pulled out a small velvet jeweler's box. Inside sat two identical silver bands. On the inner curve of one, an engraving read, E and N, the 12th of October, 2023. They hadn't just started dating. They had been together for over a year. This wasn't a shock. I had suspicions since his sophomore year. While other guys bragged about girls, Ethan spent weekends painting detailed portraits of his track teammate. He never seemed interested in dating girls. I never pried. My only priority was that my kid felt safe under my roof, and I knew he would tell me when he felt the time was right. By Saturday evening, the unspoken tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. At 6:45 p.m., I was out on the back deck firing up the grill for steaks. The November wind was brutal, whipping freezing air straight off Lake Michigan. The sliding glass door slid open, and Noah stepped out, holding a ceramic platter for the meat. He was shivering, drowned in an oversized collegiate hoodie that I knew for a fact belonged to Ethan. He set the platter down, avoiding my gaze. "Hand me that basting brush, will you?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the grill. He handed it over, his fingers visibly trembling. I painted a layer of marinade onto the meat, letting the silence stretch out over the hissing charcoal. "So," I said casually, flipping a steak, "when exactly were you boys planning on telling me about the matching silver rings?" I heard him gasp. The ceramic platter rattled against the wooden railing as he bumped into it. "Mr. Harris, we didn't." I finally turned to look at him. His face was chalk white in the porch light. "Noah, relax. I found them while doing the laundry. I'm not upset." He swallowed hard, looking like he wanted to jump off the deck into the snow. 14 months, he blurted out, his voice cracking. "We hit 14 months last week." "That's a solid milestone," I said, leaning against the railing. "Please don't kick him out," Noah pleaded, the panic fully taking over. "I'll leave. I'll go get a motel room right now. Just don't take this out on Ethan." I set my tongs down. The sheer desperation in his voice physically hurt to hear. "Kick him out? Noah, do you honestly think I would ever do that?" He stared at me, his chest heaving. "He was terrified to tell you. He said you sacrificed everything for him. He couldn't bear to lose your respect." I stepped closer, lowering my voice over the howling wind. "Listen to me carefully. I worked double graveyard shifts at the shipping warehouse for 6 brutal years just to afford the legal fees to keep his mother from dragging him back to her toxic, chaotic life. I gave up everything so he could have a stable foundation. Do you really think I care who he brings home, as long as that person treats him right?" Noah wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve, nodding slowly. "I just want him to be loved," I said firmly. "And from where I'm standing, you're doing a damn good job of that." The sliding door rattled open again. Ethan stepped out, wrapping his arms around himself. He stopped dead when he saw Noah wiping his eyes, then looked at me, pure terror washing over his features. "Dad, what's going on?" "Nothing bad, kid," I said calmly. "Your partner and I were just having a chat about the laundry." Ethan froze, his jaw dropping slightly. You know?" "I know," I said, walking over and placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "And I need you to hear this loud and clear. You never have to hide who you are in this house. Not from me. Ever." He let out a shaky breath, the tension leaving his body all at once, and leaned his head against my shoulder. Later that night, the three of us were sitting around the fire pit in the backyard. The wind had died down, leaving a crisp, bitter cold. Instead of sitting on opposite sides of the patio like they had all week, I walked into the house, grabbed the heavy wool blanket off the sofa, and tossed it right onto Ethan's lap. "Share it," I told them, "before you both freeze to death." Ethan looked up at me, a genuine relaxed smile finally breaking across his face. He wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, then lifting the edge, pulling Noah in close against him. We sat there for a long time. The only sounds were the crackle of the wood and the occasional distant hum of a car on the interstate. They were quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. It wasn't that tight, breathless silence where everyone is watching their feet. It was the sound of a lung finally filling with air. Noah stayed glued to Ethan's side. Every few minutes, I'd see Ethan's hand reach out under the blanket to squeeze Noah's arm, just a quick check-in. It reminded me of when Ethan was 6 and we moved into this house. He used to follow me from room to room, holding onto the hem of my shirt like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. Seeing him do that with Noah, the same instinctual reach for grounding it, told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, the mood in the house shifted from relief into the cold, hard reality of what they'd actually lost. Acceptance didn't put a roof over their heads back in Chicago. Around 9 a.m., Ethan was at the kitchen table with a legal pad, his laptop open to a spreadsheet. He looked older than 22. He looked like I did when the warehouse union threatened to strike, and I didn't know how we'd make the mortgage. "The insurance adjuster called," Ethan said, not looking up. He was chewing on the end of a pen. "They're offering a settlement for the contents of the apartment, but the building management is being a nightmare about the security deposit and the damages to the structure. They're trying to claim the fire was our fault because of a surge protector in the living room." "Was it?" I asked, pouring a cup of coffee. "It was a brand new Belkin," Noah said, coming in from the hall. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes puffy. "The fire department report said the wiring inside the wall was from the 70s. The insulation just gave out. But the landlord is some corporate entity based out of Delaware. They're stonewalling." "They think you're kids," I said. "They think you'll take whatever scrap they throw at you because you don't have the stomach for a fight." "We don't have the money for a fight, Dad," Ethan muttered. He tapped the calculator. $8,000 in property is just the stuff we can catalog. My portfolio was on a physical drive that got melted. My backup was in the cloud, but I lost 3 weeks of work on the senior design project. If I don't get that apartment deposit back, I can't put down a first and last on a new place. We're stuck. I sat down across from him. "You're not stuck. You're here. I can't stay in Milwaukee forever, Dad. Classes start back up in person in January. I have to be there." The phone on the table buzzed. Ethan looked at it and his face soured. "It's my mom." The room went cold. My ex-wife, Sheila, hadn't called Ethan in 6 months. The last time they spoke, it was because she needed $300 for a car repair. affair that turned out to be a weekend in Tunica. She'd heard about the fire through some distant cousin on Facebook. Ethan put it on speaker. Ethan, baby. Her voice crackled through. She sounded like she was in a crowded place, maybe a bar or a busy mall. I heard about the apartment. My heart just broke. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm at Dad's, Mom, Ethan said, his voice flat. Oh, of course you are, she said, and I could hear the familiar sharp edge of resentment. Listen, I've been talking to a friend of mine, a lawyer. He says you could be looking at a massive payout if you play your cards right. Emotional distress, negligence. You just need to come down here to Indianapolis for a few days so we can sit down with him. Ethan looked at me. I shook my head slowly. Sheila's lawyer friends were usually guys she met at the track who knew how to fill out a personal injury form. We're handling it, Mom. The insurance is moving. They'll lowball you, Ethan. You're always so stubborn, just like your father. I'm trying to help you. I have a room for you. Just you. I don't know why that roommate of yours is always hanging around anyway. It's time you came home to family. Noah stood by the counter, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the granite. Ethan's eyes flickered to him, then back to the phone. Noah is family, Mom, Ethan said. His voice didn't shake. And I'm staying here. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a sharp, nasal sigh. Fine. Waste your time in that drafty house, but don't come crying to me when you're broke and sleeping on a floor. She hung up without saying goodbye. Ethan stared at the phone for a second, then slid it across the table. She's going to call the landlord, I said. It was a hunch, but I knew Sheila. She smelled money, even if it wasn't hers. She'd try to insert herself into the claim as a concerned parent, just to see if any of the check would bounce her way. She can't, Ethan said. The lease is in my name, and Noah's. She knows your social, Ethan. She's used it before. That hit him. He remembered the credit card she'd opened in his name when he was 18, the one I'd had to pay off to save his credit score before he applied for student loans. I need to call the insurance company and put a pin on the file, Ethan said, standing up so fast his chair scraped. I need to make sure they only talk to me. He went into the den, his voice already rising as he started the automated phone tree. Noah stayed in the kitchen with me. He looked smaller today, the adrenaline of the coming out having worn off, replaced by the crushing weight of being a 22-year-old with nothing but a bag of smoke-damaged clothes and a boyfriend whose mother was a shark. Mr. Harris? Noah said quietly. Call me Jim, Noah. We're past the formalities. Jim, I have some money saved. My grandmother left me a small bond when she passed. It's about $5,000. I haven't told Ethan yet. I looked at him. Why not? Because he's so proud. He wants to be the one who fixes this. He feels like he failed me because the fire started on his side of the room. He thinks he's supposed to be the provider or something. If I tell him I can cover the new deposit, he'll feel like he's leaning on me too hard. He's your partner, Noah. Leaning is the point. I know, but with everything with his mom, he's so used to people taking from him. I don't want him to feel like he owes me. I walked over and put the coffee pot back on the burner. He doesn't feel that way about you, but if you want my advice, keep it in your pocket for a week. Let him fight this landlord. Let him feel like he's standing up for himself. If the corporate guys win the first round, then you step in, not as a savior, but as a teammate. Noah nodded, looking relieved. Thanks, Jim. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls. Ethan spent 4 hours on hold with the insurance company, only to find out that Sheila had already called them, claiming to be his legal representative. They'd frozen the claim for identity verification. It was a classic Sheila move. She didn't want the money to help him. She wanted to create a bottleneck so he'd have to talk to her, have to negotiate with her. By 5 p.m., Ethan was vibrating with rage. He was pacing the living room, kicking at the corner of the rug. She's doing it again. Even after everything, she's trying to ruin this. She knows I need that money for the laptop, Dad. I can't finish the semester without it. We'll go to the bank tomorrow, I said. We'll get the notarized papers. We'll shut her out. It takes time. Time I don't have. He grabbed his jacket, one of mine, since his was still in the wash, and headed for the door. Where are you going? I asked. For a drive. I just need to breathe. He slammed the door. A second later, Noah followed him out, not saying a word, just trailing him into the cold November twilight. I watched them from the window. They got into the rental car, a silver Chevy that looked out of place in our gravel driveway. They didn't pull out immediately. I saw the interior lights stay on. Through the windshield, I could see Ethan slumped over the steering wheel, his head in his hands. Noah was leaning over the center console, his hand on Ethan's back, rubbing small circles through the heavy fabric of my old coat. They sat like that for 20 minutes. When they finally drove off, I went to the kitchen and started making a list. I knew the landlord company Ethan was talking about, Midwest Urban Holdings. They owned half the student housing in Chicago. I dealt with companies like them back when I was shop steward at the warehouse. They weren't afraid of 20-year-old kids, but they were very afraid of bad PR and building code violations. I pulled out my old ledger from the bottom drawer. I still had the number for Miller, a guy I used to work with who went into private fire inspection. If the landlord wanted to play dirty by blaming a surge protector, I was going to make sure they regretted ever letting an inspector look at those 70-year-old wires. But as I was looking for Miller's number, my house phone rang. It was a local Milwaukee number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this James Harris? A woman's voice, sharp and professional. Speaking. This is Detective Miller with the Milwaukee PD. I'm calling regarding a rental vehicle registered to a Mr. Ethan Harris. There's been a situation at a gas station over on Howell Avenue. My heart dropped into my stomach. Is he okay? Was there an accident? No accident, sir, but there's been a physical altercation. We need you to come down here. Your son is being detained and his passenger is currently being treated by EMTs. I didn't ask another question. I grabbed my keys and ran for the door. The drive to Howell Avenue felt like it took 3 hours, though it was only 10 minutes. My mind was racing. Ethan wasn't a fighter. He was a designer. He was the kid who cried when we had to put our old dog down. When I pulled into the gas station, the blue and red lights were blinding against the dark sky. The rental Chevy was parked crooked at pump 4. Ethan was sitting on the curb, his hands zip-tied behind his back. He looked small, his face covered in something dark blood. I jumped out of the truck before I'd even fully put it in park. Ethan, stay back, sir, an officer shouted, stepping into my path. That's my son, I yelled. What happened? Over by the ambulance, I saw Noah. He was sitting on the back bumper, a paramedic holding a gauze pad to his temple. He looked dazed. Dad, Ethan saw me and tried to stand up, but the officer pushed him back down. Dad, he touched him. He was saying things. He wouldn't stop. I looked at the other side of the parking lot. A man in a grease-stained hoodie was being talked to by another cop. He had a fat lip and was gesturing wildly toward Ethan. I turned back to the officer, blocking me. What happened here? Your son's friend was inside paying, the officer said, his voice level but bored. The individual over there made some choice comments when he saw them together in the car, followed them out, started shoving the passenger. Your son jumped out of the car and tackled the guy. He hit Noah first, Ethan screamed from the curb. He called him a freak and shoved his head into the pump. I looked at Noah. The gauze was soaked through with red. My blood started to boil. All those years of keeping Ethan safe, of keeping the world's ugliness away from him, and it had found him at a gas station in his own hometown. Is the other guy being charged? I asked, my voice dangerously low. He's claiming self-defense, sir, says the boys started it. We're waiting to pull the security footage. I walked over to Ethan. I ignored the cop's warning and knelt down in front of my boy. He was shaking not from the cold, but from the pure, raw adrenaline of a kid who had finally been pushed too far. Look at me, I said. Ethan looked up. His lip was split, and there was a bruise forming under his left eye. Did you hit him first? I asked. He was hurting Noah, Dad. He had him by the throat. I turned to the officer. You hear that? That's defense of a third party. You check those cameras. You check them right now. The officer sighed. We're working on it, Mr. Harris. But for now, your son is going to the station for processing. As they lifted Ethan up to put him in the back of the squad car, he looked over at Noah. Noah was watching him, his eyes wide and terrified, his face pale under the fluorescent gas station lights. I'm sorry, Ethan mouthed. Noah didn't say anything. He just reached out a shaky hand, as if he could touch the air between them. I stood there in the middle of the parking lot, the smell of gasoline and cold exhaust filling my lungs. I looked at the man who had started it, the man who was now laughing with his buddy a few yards away, thinking he'd gotten away with a lesson. I took a breath. I didn't go over to him. I didn't swing. I had too much to lose for that. Instead, I walked over to the ambulance. How is he? I asked the paramedic. Stitches for sure, the woman said. Probably a mild concussion. He needs to go to the ER. Noah looked up at me. Jim, don't let them take Ethan. Please. It's my fault. I shouldn't have said anything back to that guy. It's not your fault, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. And nobody is taking anyone. I'm going to follow the ambulance to the hospital. I'll call our lawyer from the car. We're going to get through this. But as I turned to go back to my truck, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. I saw the news alerts on the scanner apps, Jim. Looks like your stable foundation is cracking. Maybe Ethan should have come to Indianapolis after all. Give me a call when you're ready to talk about that insurance settlement. Sheila. She was watching. Even from 300 miles away, she was circling like a vulture. I deleted the text without replying. I had a son in a squad car, a boy in an ambulance, and a landlord to break. The bro act was over. The hiding was over. Now, the real fight was starting. I put the truck in gear and pulled out onto Howell Avenue, keeping the flashing red lights of the ambulance in my line of sight. I synced my phone to the dashboard Bluetooth and dialed Marty. Marty had been the union's go-to defense attorney back when the shipping company tried to bust our pensions in 2008. He wasn't cheap and he wasn't warm, but he knew every desk sergeant and duty judge in Milwaukee County. He picked up on the fourth ring. A television murmured in the background. Jim, it's 9:45. I need you on the clock, Marty. District 2. Ethan's being booked for assault and battery. The television muted. You're Ethan, the art kid? Yeah, he tackled a guy at a gas station who put his hands on his partner. Partner? Marty repeated. It wasn't a question, just a quick mental categorization. And the other guy? Claiming self-defense. Cops at the scene were dragging their feet on pulling the pump security footage. They took my boy in zip ties and let the local grease monkey sit on the curb and smoke. All right, Marty sighed, the sound of a chair squeaking over the line. Don't go to the station yet. The intake officers will just let you rot in the waiting area to punish you for being a hovering parent. Go to the hospital, check on the partner, get his statement in writing while it's fresh. Write down to what the guy smelled like. I'll make some calls, see who's working the desk at District 2 tonight. I'll meet you there in 90 minutes. Have $3,000 ready for a retainer. He hung up. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. $3,000. I had it in the savings account, but it was earmarked for the property taxes due at the end of the month. I pushed the thought away. I'd pick up extra shifts. I'd sell the truck if I had to. The ER at Street Luke's was practically empty, smelling of industrial bleach and stale vending machine coffee. I found Noah in Bay 4 behind a floral privacy curtain. He was sitting on the edge of the examination bed, a thin hospital blanket draped over his shoulders. A resident was carefully stitching up a jagged 2-inch gash just above his left eyebrow. Noah looked up when I pushed the curtain aside. His good eye was red and swollen with tears. 7 stitches, the resident said, tying off a knot. Mild concussion protocol. He needs to be woken up every 4 hours tonight. No screens, no bright lights. He's lucky the skull didn't fracture. The pump casing he hit was solid steel. Thank you, Doc, I said. The resident gave a curt nod, disposed of his gloves, and slipped out. As soon as the curtain fell back into place, Noah buried his face in his hands. A sharp, ragged sob tore out of his chest. Hey, I said softly, stepping in and putting a hand on the back of his neck. Hey, breathe. You're okay. I ruined it, Noah choked out, his voice muffled. I ruined everything. He's going to get expelled. If he has a criminal record, he can't get his design license. His mom was right. I'm just a drag on him. Stop, I said, my voice hardening just enough to cut through his panic. Look at me. Noah dragged his hands down his face, wincing as he pulled the skin near his fresh stitches. You didn't throw a punch, I told him. You didn't ask to be assaulted. And Ethan did exactly what he was supposed to do. He protected his family. We're going to get a lawyer, we're going to pull that security tape, and we're going to bury that guy. Do you understand me? Noah swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Then he reached into the pocket of his blood-stained jeans and pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking so badly, he dropped it twice before he managed to unlock it. He opened his banking app and held the screen out to me. Available balance, $5,420. I told you I had the bonds from my grandmother, Noah said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I cashed them out this morning before we went for the drive. I was going to surprise Ethan. I was going to tell him we had the deposit for a new place in Chicago. He hit a button on the screen, opening a transfer window. Give me your routing number, Jim. I shook my head. Noah, no, that's your safety net. I don't have a safety net, he fired back, the raw desperation finally cracking his polite facade. My parents haven't spoken to me in 3 years. They changed the locks on the house in Grand Rapids the day after I told them I was gay. Ethan is my safety net. You're my safety net. I am not letting him sit in a cage because of me. Take the money for the lawyer, please. I looked at the numbers on the glowing screen, then at the bruised, terrified kid holding it out to me. He wasn't asking for permission. He was begging for a seat at the table. He was begging to fight for my son the same way my son had just fought for him. 3,000, I said quietly. Keep the rest for the deposit. We're going to need it when this is over. Noah nodded, a fraction of the tension leaving his shoulders. He typed in the amount. An hour later, I was standing in the harsh fluorescent glare of the District 2 precinct. Marty was already there, leaning against the bulletproof glass of the intake desk, talking in a low, even tone to the duty sergeant. I sat on a wooden bench against the wall. Noah was beside me, his head resting against the cinder block, his eyes closed. Every time the heavy metal doors to the holding area clanged open, he flinched. Finally, Marty walked over to us. He wasn't smiling. I got him out on a signature bond, Marty said, keeping his voice down. They're processing his release now. But Jim, it's a mess. I stood up. Did they pull the tape? They pulled it, Marty said grimly. It shows the guy, a local named Miller, getting in Noah's face. It shows Miller shoving Noah. Noah trips backwards and hits his head on the pump. It does times, not times, show Miller throwing a punch or holding him by the throat. He had me against the car before the pump, Noah interjected, his eyes snapping open. He grabbed my jacket. The camera angle is blocked by the gas pump itself during the initial altercation, Marty explained, looking at Noah with clinical detachment. What the camera times show clearly is Ethan sprinting out of the driver's side, tackling Miller from behind, and hitting him 3 times in the face while he's on the ground. Miller has a broken nose and a fractured orbital bone. My stomach turned to lead. So what are they charging him with? Aggravated assault, Marty said. It's a felony, Jim. The DA is going to argue that Ethan's response was disproportionate to the threat. Miller is claiming he was just exchanging words and that Noah slipped. That's a lie, Noah said, his voice trembling. He called me a faggot and told me to watch my back. He shoved me. I believe you, Marty said quietly. But the DA is looking at a kid with a clean record who beat a guy half to death in a parking lot. Miller wants to press full charges. He's already talking to a civil lawyer about suing Ethan for medical damages. The heavy metal door clanged open again. Ethan walked out. He was wearing his t-shirt, shivering in the cold air of the station. His hands were stuffed in his pockets. The bruise under his eye was a deep, angry purple, and there was dried blood on his chin. He looked exhausted. He looked like a little boy. He saw me, and his shoulders slumped. He didn't look at Noah. He just walked straight toward me and stopped a foot away. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered. Don't, I said, grabbing him by the back of the neck and pulling him into a tight hug. I didn't care who was watching. You're safe. That's all that matters right now. He buried his face in my shoulder, his whole body shaking. I held him until the trembling stopped. When I pulled back, he finally looked at Noah. Noah stood up, swaying slightly. He reached out and touched Ethan's arm. Hey, Ethan looked at the white bandage on Noah's forehead. His jaw tightened, the guilt pooling in his eyes. Does it hurt? Not as much as your hand probably does. Noah tried to joke, but his voice cracked. Let's go home, I said, turning to Marty. Call me tomorrow. We'll figure out the next step. The drive back to the house was silent. The adrenaline had burned off, leaving behind a heavy, suffocating dread. It was almost 3 a.m. by the time we pulled into the gravel driveway. I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The house was freezing. I'd forgotten to turn up the thermostat before sprinting out. Ethan walked straight to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Noah followed him, his shadow as always. I stayed in the hallway, hanging up my keys. Dad, Ethan called out. His voice was completely flat. I walked into the kitchen. Ethan was standing over the small dinette table. His replacement laptop, the one he'd bought used 3 days ago, was open. The screen was glowing, showing his email inbox. What is it? I asked. He turned the laptop around so I could see. It was an email from the property management company, Midwest Urban Holdings. It was marked Times Urgent, Legal, Notice. I leaned in and read it over his shoulder. They weren't just denying the renter's insurance claim. They had officially terminated the lease due to gross negligence and violation of property safety codes. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the email was a PDF invoice. It was a bill for the structural damages to the building, the smoke mitigation for the surrounding units, and the loss of rental income for the gutted apartment. They were demanding $48,000. They put a lien on my student bank account, Ethan said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. It says it right there at the bottom. They got an emergency injunction. Any money that goes into my account is frozen. They can't do that, Noah said, stepping closer. Can they? They just did, I said, staring at the number. 48,000 plus the felony charge plus the civil suit from the gas station. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. The sender name made my blood run ice cold. Sheila Harris. I opened it. It wasn't addressed to me. It was a forwarded message. She had forwarded me an email she had sent to the dean of students at Ethan's University in Chicago. To the office of the dean, I am writing as the mother of Ethan Harris. I am officially requesting a medical withdrawal on his behalf for the remainder of the academic year. Ethan has recently been involved in a devastating fire and, as of tonight, has been arrested for a violent felony in Milwaukee. He is suffering from a severe mental health break and is currently under the influence of an unstable partner. He is not fit to continue his coursework. Please send all further correspondence regarding his tuition refund and academic standing to my address in Indianapolis. I stared at the screen, the words blurring together. She wasn't just trying to get the insurance money anymore. She was trying to strip him down to nothing. She was trying to take his school, his housing, and his money, forcing him to crawl back to her because she was the only one who could fix it. Jim? Noah asked, watching my face. What's wrong? I looked up at the two of them. 2 kids, battered, exhausted, and targeted from every possible angle. Go upstairs, I said, putting my phone face down on the counter. Both of you, go to sleep. Dad, what was on your phone? Ethan asked, his eyes narrowing. Nothing that can't wait until the sun comes up, I lied. Go, take the heavy blankets. They didn't argue. They were too tired. I watched them walk up the stairs, Ethan leaning heavily on the banister, Noah staying 1 step behind him, keeping a hand hovering near Ethan's lower back, just in case he stumbled. When I heard the bedroom door click shut, I walked into the den. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat down in my old recliner in the dark. I had $3,000 of Noah's money, a felony charge hanging over my son, a $48,000 corporate shakedown, and a vindictive ex-wife actively sabotaging his future. I picked up the phone and dialed the Indianapolis area code. It rang 3 times before she answered. I could hear the clinking of glasses in the background and the low thrum of a jukebox. She was at O'Malley's. She'd been going to that same dive bar on the south side of Indy for 15 years. I figured you'd call tonight, she said. Her voice was slightly slurred, thick with cheap vodka and misplaced confidence. Rescind the email to the dean, Sheila, right now. She let out a dry, rattling laugh. Or what, Jim? You'll take me to court? You don't have the money for a custody battle anymore. And Ethan isn't a minor. You can't stop me from talking to his school. He's 22. You have no legal authority to withdraw him. I'm his mother, and he just caught an aggravated assault charge in your backyard. You think a private design school in Chicago wants that kind of PR? They'll expel him by Monday. If I file the medical withdrawal first, we get an 80% tuition refund for the semester. There it was. It was never about his safety. It was never about getting him away from the unstable roommate. It was the tuition refund. She knew Ethan's scholarships and federal loans went directly to the university, but any refund for medical hardship overages would be routed back to the primary billing contact. She had never taken her name off the bursar's account from his freshman year. That money doesn't go to you, Sheila. It goes back to the lenders, not the cash surplus, she said smoothly. And God knows the boy needs it right now. I heard about the landlord's invoice, Jim, 48 grand. You really let him sign a lease with Midwest Urban? They're going to eat him alive. They've already frozen his accounts, haven't they? I gripped the phone so hard the plastic creaked. How do you know about Midwest Urban? I called the property manager, she said, sounding deeply satisfied with herself. Told them I was his mother, checking in on the damages. They were more than happy to tell me about the lien. He's ruined, Jim. He has no money. He's about to have a felony record, and he's sleeping on your floor. Send him to me. Let me handle the school and the insurance. You want to steal his tuition refund so you can gamble it away at the track. I want to protect my son from his own stupid mistakes, she snapped, dropping the breezy act. And from that little faggot he's trailing around with, getting him into fistfights at gas stations. You let this happen under your roof. I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't threaten her again. I just pressed the red button and dropped the phone onto the floor. I sat in the dark until the sun came up, watching the gray light slowly creep across the floorboards. At 6:30, the floorboards overhead creaked. Footsteps moved toward the bathroom. The pipes groaned as the shower turned on. I went to the kitchen and put a pot of coffee on. 10 minutes later, Ethan came downstairs. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. The bruise under his eye had blossomed into a horrific shade of black and yellow, swelling his eye half shut. He looked at the coffee maker, then at me. You didn't sleep, he said. Neither did you. I poured a mug and slid it across the island to him. He wrapped both hands around it, staring down into the black liquid. I tried logging into my student portal upstairs. My credentials have been suspended. There's a banner saying I need to contact the Dean of Students' office immediately. I reached over, picked up my phone from where I'd left it on the counter last night, and handed it to him. The forwarded email from Sheila was still on the screen. Ethan read it in silence. I watched his good eye track back and forth across the small text. When he finished, he didn't throw the phone or yell. He just carefully set the device face down on the granite. She wants the tuition refund, he said. His voice was hollow, stripped of any surprise. I know. If she processes a medical withdrawal, it defaults the terms of my merit scholarship. I lose the funding for senior year. Even if I beat the charges here, I won't be able to afford to go back in the fall. She won't get that far, I said. You're 22. You can call the registrar on Monday and block her access. Dad, I have a felony arraignment on Monday. If the school runs a background check and sees an active aggravated assault charge, they won't just let me register for classes. They have a strict code of conduct. Mom knows that. She's trying to force the withdrawal before they expel me, so she can grab the cash. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was Marty. I answered it on speaker so Ethan could hear. Morning, Marty. Tell me some good news. I don't have any. Marty's gravelly voice came through. I just got off the phone with the DA's office. They aren't dropping it to a misdemeanor. The ADA handling the intake is a guy named Kovic. He's pushing for the full aggravated charge. Why? I asked. It's a first offense. He was defending a third party because the guy Ethan beat up is named Terry Miller. Turns out Terry Miller's brother-in-law is Alderman Vance for the 14th district. Vance made a call to the precinct this morning. He wants the violent thug who attacked his brother-in-law prosecuted to the fullest extent. Ethan closed his eyes and leaned his forehead against the cabinet. Marty, Miller started it, I said, my voice rising. He shoved Noah into a steel pump. Noah got 7 stitches. Did you tell Kovic that? I did, Kovic said since the camera didn't catch the initial shove. It's a he said, followed by an indisputable, recorded beatdown. Miller is walking around in a neck brace today. He hired a personal injury lawyer, some billboard guy, who just filed a civil suit against Ethan for medical damages and emotional distress. Marty paused, and I heard the flick of a lighter over the line. I need the retainer, Jim. 3 grand, and I need it by noon. I have to file a motion to preserve all the surveillance footage from the surrounding businesses before the gas station system overwrites it on a 48-hour loop. If we can find another angle that shows Miller attacking Noah first, we might have a shot at self-defense. You'll have the money by noon, I said. Good. Don't let him talk to anyone. Not the school, not the cops, not the landlord. I'll see you at my office at 1. The line went dead. Ethan looked at me. 3 grand. Dad, my account is frozen. Midwest Urban locked it down with that lien. I can't even buy gas, let alone pay a lawyer. I have it covered, I said. From where? Your savings? The money you were keeping for the property taxes? Dad, you can't. If you miss the tax deadline, the county penalties will bury you. Don't worry about my finances. I am worrying about them. You worked third shift for 6 years to keep this house. I'm not letting you lose it because I couldn't control my temper. You didn't lose your temper. Noah's voice came from the doorway. We both turned. Noah was standing there in the oversized hoodie, the white bandage stark against his pale skin. He looked like he'd been run over by a truck. He walked into the kitchen, his eyes fixed on Ethan. You protected me, Noah said, and you're not taking Jim's tax money. Noah, stay out of this, Ethan warned, his tone sharp with misplaced embarrassment. No, Noah said, stepping right up to him. Jim already has the money. I transferred it to his account last night at the hospital. Ethan froze. He looked at Noah, then at me. What are you talking about? My grandmother left me a bond, Noah said quietly. It was a little over $5,000. I cashed it out. I gave $3,000 to Jim for the lawyer. The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. Ethan stared at Noah as if he had just spoken in a foreign language. The pride I knew was etched into my son's bones. The pride he'd built as a defense mechanism against his mother's constant financial betrayals flared up instantly. You paid my lawyer? Ethan said, his voice dangerously low. I helped my partner, Noah corrected, his chin trembling just a fraction, though he held his ground. You're in this mess because of me. I'm in this mess because I hit a guy, Ethan snapped. You didn't ask me to do that, and you definitely didn't ask me for permission to dump your only safety net into my legal fees. That money was yours, Noah, for emergencies. This is an emergency, Ethan. You're looking at a felony. And what happens when we have to pay the $48,000 to the landlord? What happens when I get expelled and we don't have a place to live? You just blew more than half your savings on a retainer. It's not your job to fix everything, Noah yelled back, his voice cracking. Stop treating me like a piece of luggage you have to carry. I'm 22. I'm an adult, and I'm not going to sit in a hospital room and watch you go to jail because your pride is too big to let me write a check. Ethan looked away, his jaw working furiously. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles white. I could see the shame burning through him. He was a kid who had spent his entire life trying not to be a burden to anyone. Not to me, not to his mother, and certainly not to the boy he loved. Transfer it back, Ethan said to me without looking up. I can't, I said simply. It's already clearing, and even if I could, I wouldn't. Marty needs it by noon. Ethan finally looked at me, the betrayal clear in his good eye. You let him do this. I let him be a man, I said, keeping my voice dead level. I let him stand beside you. If you're too stubborn to accept that, then you need to do some serious growing up before Monday. Ethan stared at me for a long second. Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen, grabbing his coat off the hook by the front door. He didn't put it on. He just carried it out the door, letting the screen slam shut behind him. Noah slumped against the counter, burying his face in his hands. He hates me. He doesn't hate you, I said, walking over and pouring a second cup of coffee. I handed it to him. He hates that he can't shield you from the ugly parts of the world. He's going to walk it off. Drink your coffee. Noah took the mug, his hands still shaking. What do we do now? Now, I said, pulling my laptop out of my bag. We go to war with a property management company. I opened the laptop and pulled up the PDF invoice Midwest Urban had sent. $48,000 for structural damages caused by a fire that the fire department itself said started in 70-year-old wiring. The landlord was claiming the spark originated from Ethan's surge protector, making him liable. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the legal notice. Arthur Penhaligon, Regional Director of Property Management, Midwest Urban Holdings. I opened a new tab and typed the name into the State Circuit Court Access database. If Arthur managed properties in Chicago, he definitely had a footprint in the public records. Renters, suing for deposits, city code violations, eviction proceedings. The search returned over 200 results. I started clicking through them. Most were standard evictions, but about 30 of them were civil suits filed by the city's building commission against Midwest Urban for failing to update electrical and plumbing codes in their historic properties. They had a pattern. They bought cheap, neglected buildings near college campuses, slapped some fresh paint on the drywall, and rented them to students at a premium. When the ancient infrastructure inevitably failed, they blamed the students, kept the deposits, and filed insurance claims against the students' renters' policies to fund the renovations they should have done years ago. Noah, I said, not taking my eyes off the screen. Where is the fire marshal's report? The one from the night of the fire. Ethan has a copy in his email, Noah said, stepping up behind me to look at the screen. But his email is locked. Did he send it to anyone else? To the school? To his insurance adjuster? Noah thought for a second. He sent a copy to my dad. Before my dad stopped answering my calls last week, he asked for proof of the fire so he could claim my lost laptop on his homeowner's insurance. Ethan emailed him the PDF. Call your dad. Noah flinched. Jim, I can't. He told me never to call him again. I don't care if he told you to walk into traffic, I said, turning to look at him. Your boyfriend is facing a felony and a $50,000 shakedown. I need that fire report. Call him. Noah stared at his phone like it was a live grenade. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing, and thumbed through his contacts. He put it on speaker and set it on the granite counter. It rang 5 times. I thought it was going to go to voicemail. Then, a sharp, irritated voice barked out. What? Noah flinched. Dad, it's Noah. I know who it is. I told you I didn't want to hear from you. The voice was cold, flat, and devoid of any parental warmth. It was the voice of a man talking to a telemarketer who had interrupted his dinner. I know, Noah said, his voice shaking. He gripped the edge of the counter. I wouldn't call if it wasn't an emergency. I need the fire marshal's report, the PDF Ethan sent you for the insurance. Why? Because the landlord is trying to sue us for the damages to the building. They put a lien on Ethan's accounts. I need the report to prove it was the wiring. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear a television playing a golf tournament in the background. Sounds like a personal problem, his dad said. I submitted that paperwork to State Farm last week. I deleted the email. It's not my job to bail you out of the mess you made when you decided to go play house with that boy. Noah's eyes welled up. He looked at me, completely defeated, ready to reach out and end the call. I reached across the island and pulled the phone toward me. Richard, I said. My voice was low, and it carried 20 years of warehouse floor authority. This is Jim Harris, Ethan's father. The line went dead silent. Listen to me very carefully, I said. I know for a fact you claimed a $3,000 MacBook Pro on your homeowner's policy using that fire report. A laptop that belongs to a kid you disowned, living in a different state. That's insurance fraud, Richard. It's a federal offense if State Farm decides to audit the claim. Are you threatening me? He asked, his voice losing its arrogant edge. I'm giving you a choice. You can open your laptop, go to your deleted items folder, and forward that PDF to my email right now. Or I can call State Farm's fraud division in about 5 minutes and let them know you're claiming property that doesn't belong to you. Your call. 10 seconds ticked by. The golf announcer murmured on the TV. What's the email address? Richard spat. I gave it to him. 2 minutes later, a notification pinged on my laptop screen. The subject line was empty. Just an attachment titled Times Chicago, FD, Incident, Report, 1023, PDF. Got it, I said to the phone. Don't ever speak to your son that way again. I hung up. Noah was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, I said, opening the document. You don't let a bully set the terms of the conversation. Not your dad, not my ex-wife, and definitely not some suit at Midwest Urban. I scrolled through the fire marshal's report. It was 10 pages of dense bureaucratic jargon filled with codes and diagrams. I skipped down to the section labeled Times Point of Origin. There it was, highlighted in the stark black and white print of the Chicago Fire Department. Primary ignition point located within the western structural wall, between studs 4 and 5. Severe degradation of cloth-insulated wiring. Estimated installation circa 1,974. Failure of insulation led to arcing, which ignited the dry framing. Secondary damage sustained to external outlets and connected devices. Surge protector. I tapped the screen. Look at this, Noah. He leaned in. Secondary damage. Exactly. The surge protector didn't start the fire. The surge protector was a victim of the fire. The wall burned from the inside out. I printed 3 copies of the page. Midwest Urban knows this. They have this exact report. They're banking on the fact that 2 22-year-old kids wouldn't read past the first page and that a lien would terrify you into settling. The front door opened. The cold wind blew through the hallway, followed by the heavy thud of boots. Ethan walked into the kitchen. His face was red from the freezing air, his breath coming in short white puffs. He hadn't put the coat on. He'd just carried it. He looked exhausted. The fight completely drained out of him. He didn't look at me. He walked straight up to Noah. I'm sorry, Ethan said. His voice was raw. I shouldn't have yelled at you. I felt like I couldn't protect you. Noah shook his his head, closing the distance between them, and wrapping his arms around Ethan's waist. He buried his face in Ethan's chest. You don't have to protect me from everything. You just have to be with me. Ethan let out a ragged sigh and wrapped his arms around Noah, resting his chin on top of Noah's head. They stood there in the middle of the kitchen, holding on to each other like they were the only two things tethering themselves to the earth. I got the fire report, I said quietly, letting them have their moment but knowing the clock was ticking. Ethan looked up, his good eye widening. How? Noah made a hard phone call, I said, handing Ethan the printed page, and it proves the landlord is lying. The wiring failed first. The surge protector was secondary. Ethan read the paper, his shoulders dropping as a massive weight lifted off him. So the lien, the 48,000. It's garbage, I said. It's an intimidation tactic, but we can't fight the landlord until we keep you out of jail. Go upstairs, take a hot shower, and put some clean clothes on. We're meeting Marty at 1 o'clock. At 12:45 p.m., we pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall off Lincoln Avenue. Marty's office was wedged between a discount dental clinic and a martial arts studio. The waiting room smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. Marty called us straight back into his office. It was a mess of manila folders and legal pads. He sat behind a massive oak desk, a half-eaten turkey sandwich resting on a piece of wax paper next to his keyboard. Have a seat, Marty said, wiping his mouth with a napkin. He looked at Ethan's bruised face, then at Noah's stitches. You two look like you went 10 rounds in a meat grinder. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the cashier's check I'd gotten from my bank an hour earlier, and slid it across the desk. $3,000. Noah's money. Marty glanced at it, nodded, and slipped it into a drawer. Retainers paid. We're officially on the clock. Here's where we stand. He pulled a file forward and flipped it open. I got a copy of the police report and the charging document. ADA Kovic is going hard. He's charging aggravated battery in a public place. Class 3, felony, carries a potential 2 to 5 years in state lockup. Noah inhaled sharply. Ethan just stared blankly at the wall behind Marty's head. I also pulled the background on Terry Miller, Marty continued. He's got 2 priors for drunk and disorderly, but no violent felonies. Works as a mechanic. And, like I said on the phone, his sister is married to Alderman Vance. So it's political, I said. Everything in this city is political, Jim. Vance is up for re-election in the spring. He wants to look tough on crime, and his brother-in-law got his face rearranged at a local gas station. Vance called the precinct commander directly. Kovic is just a pawn trying to score points with the higher-ups. Did you file the motion for the other cameras? I asked. I did. A judge signed off on it at 10 this morning. I sent an investigator over to the gas station and the liquor store across the street. The liquor store had a camera pointing right at the pumps. Marty reached over and hit a button on his computer. A grainy, black and white video started playing on his monitor. He turned the screen toward us. It was silent, but clear enough. It showed the rental Chevy parked at the pump. It showed Noah walking out of the convenience store, holding 2 cups of coffee. It showed Terry Miller walking out behind him, stepping directly into Noah's path. We watched Miller get in Noah's face. We watched Miller point a finger into Noah's chest. Then, plain as day, we watched Miller grab Noah by the collar of his jacket and shove him violently backward. Noah hit the steel pump casing and went down hard, dropping the coffees. A split second later, the driver's side door flew open. Ethan sprinted around the back of the car, tackled Miller to the asphalt, and threw 3 fast, brutal punches before Miller's buddy dragged him off. Marty paused the video. That's defense of a third party, I said, pointing at the frozen screen. Miller struck first. It's on tape. It is, Marty agreed, leaning back in his leather chair. And any reasonable jury would acquit him. But Kovic doesn't want to go to a jury. He wants a plea deal to pad his stats. He called me 20 minutes before you got here. He offered to drop it to a misdemeanor simple battery, 6 months probation, anger management classes, and a $2,000 fine. Ethan looked at Marty. A misdemeanor? It keeps you out of prison, Marty said. But it puts a violent crime on your permanent record. He can't take that, Noah said instantly. He's applying for his state architecture and design licenses next year. A violent misdemeanor will trigger an ethics review. They could deny his license. Not to mention his school will expel him, I added. They have a zero-tolerance policy for violent convictions. If he pleads guilty to anything, my ex-wife will forward the court records to the dean herself. Marty sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I know, Jim, but if we reject the plea and go to trial, Ethan has to sit with a felony charge hanging over his head for a year while the court system grinds away. Can he survive a year of that? Can he stay in school with an open felony case? No, Ethan said quietly. If the charge isn't dropped entirely, the school will suspend me pending the outcome of the trial. We were boxed in. If he pled guilty, he lost his career. If he fought it, he lost his education. Why is Kovic pushing this so hard if the tape shows Miller started it? I asked, frustration boiling over. Even Vance has to see this as a losing case for them. Marty leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. Because it's not just Vance, it's money. He pulled another piece of paper from the file. I do my homework, Jim. When you told me Ethan's landlord was Midwest Urban Holdings, I ran a cross-reference. Guess who one of Alderman Vance's biggest campaign contributors is? I stared at him. You're kidding. A PAC funded entirely by Midwest. Urban's executive board maxed out their donations to Vance's campaign last cycle. 10 grand. Legal and above board. Marty tapped the paper. Midwest Urban slapped a 48 grand lien on Ethan. They know he doesn't have it, but if he gets a felony conviction, he gets expelled. He loses his student loans, his earning potential tanks, and he becomes legally toxic. He won't be able to hire a civil lawyer to fight their bogus fire claim. They're using the DA's office to bankrupt him before he can fight back. The sheer scale of the trap settled over the room. Sheila wanted the tuition refund. The landlord wanted the insurance money and a scapegoat. The DA wanted a political win. And they were all using Ethan as the sacrificial lamb. We have the fire report, I said, pushing the printed pages across Marty's desk. The Chicago Fire Department explicitly blames the building's wiring. Midwest Urban is lying. Marty read the highlighted section. A slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Oh, this is beautiful, Marty muttered. This is actionable fraud. They filed a civil lien using a falsified premise. Can we use it? Ethan asked. We can use it to blow up Midwest Urban, Marty said. But it doesn't help us with the DA right now. Kovic doesn't care about a civil dispute in Chicago. He only cares about the assault in his jurisdiction. We need leverage on Terry Miller to make him drop the criminal complaint. How do we do that? Noah asked. We dig, Marty said. Miller filed a civil suit against you this morning for medical damages. That opens him up to discovery. I'm going to pull every medical record, every tax return, every arrest report that guy has ever generated. I'll find the dirt, but it takes a few days. Marty looked at Ethan. Your arraignment is Monday morning, we plead not guilty, we demand a speedy trial, and we pray Kovic blinks before your school finds out about the charge. We walked out of the office back into the freezing afternoon air. The sky was an unbroken sheet of gray clouds, threatening snow. Ethan stopped by the car, looking back at the strip mall. It never ends, does it? You try to do one right thing, and the whole world just decides to cave in on you. It feels that way, I said, unlocking the doors. But they made a mistake. Ethan looked at me. Who? All of them. Sheila, Midwest Urban, Miller. They thought they were dealing with a terrified college kid who was entirely alone. I opened the driver's door. They didn't know you had a team. The weekend was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Saturday morning, Midwest Urban sent an automated notice to Ethan's locked email, threatening to forward his debt to a collection agency if he didn't sign a settlement agreement. The agreement stipulated he would drop any counterclaims against them and accept full liability for the fire. It was a gag order wrapped in a shakedown. Ethan ignored it. Sunday afternoon, Sheila called the house phone 6 times. I finally unplugged it from the wall. She was getting desperate. The Monday deadline for the university's tuition refund window was closing. If she didn't get him withdrawn by tomorrow, the money locked in the system. By Sunday night, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Noah was sitting on the rug in the living room, a notebook open in front of him, trying to reconstruct his lost class notes from memory. Ethan was pacing the kitchen, burning nervous energy. At 8 p.m., I told them to put their coats on. Where are we going? Ethan asked, pausing his pacing. Out. Both of you are going stir-crazy. I drove them downtown to the 3rd Ward. The streets were wet with melting snow, the brick buildings glowing under the streetlights. I parked near the public market and walked them over to a small, quiet diner I used to go to after my warehouse shifts. It wasn't fancy, just vinyl booths and neon signs, but it was warm, and nobody cared who you were. We slid into a back booth. I ordered 3 coffees and a plate of fries. For the first 20 minutes, nobody talked about lawyers, landlords, or court dates. We just sat there. Noah started telling a story about a typography professor they had, who insisted on wearing a different historically accurate ascot every Tuesday. Ethan actually smiled, a genuine relaxed smile that made the horrific bruising on his face look a little less grim. It was a glimpse of the life they were supposed to be living. 2 kids, wrapped up in art, school, and each other. Instead of sitting in precinct holding cells and lawyers' offices. Jim? Noah asked, dipping a fry in ketchup. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Why did you work 3rd shift? Ethan said you used to be a machinist during the day. I took a sip of my coffee. I was. But when Ethan was 7, Sheila filed for sole custody. She wanted to move him to Florida with a guy she met at a casino. I needed a lawyer to stop her, and I needed to prove I could provide a stable home environment. 3rd shift paid a time and a half differential. I worked nights, so I could be awake to walk him to the bus stop in the morning and sleep while he was at school. Ethan looked down at his mug. You never slept. I slept enough, I said. The point is, Noah, you do what you have to do to protect your house, whatever shape that house takes. I looked between the two of them. Tomorrow morning is going to be ugly. The courthouse is intimidating by design. Kovic is going to throw a lot of big words around, and the judge is going to treat you like a number. You don't let it shake you. You stand up straight, you say, not guilty, Your Honor, and you let Marty do the talking. Monday morning. The Milwaukee County Courthouse was a massive limestone monolith that felt like a tomb. We walked through the metal detectors at 8:15 a.m. Ethan wore his only surviving dress shirt, slightly wrinkled from being packed in a duffel bag, and a tie I had lent him. The collar couldn't hide the tension in his neck. Noah walked right beside him. We had agreed Noah wouldn't come into the actual courtroom. Miller's presence might trigger a violation of the temporary restraining order they'd slapped on Ethan. So Noah sat on a wooden bench in the crowded marble hallway, outside branch 42. I'll be right here, Noah said, squeezing Ethan's hand quickly before letting go as people walked past. 10 minutes, Ethan said, trying to sound confident. Marty met us at the heavy double doors. He was wearing a sharp gray suit, carrying his battered leather briefcase. He pulled us aside. Change of plans, Marty said, his voice low. Kovic isn't handling the arraignment. Who is? I asked. The chief deputy DA? Marty said grimly. They escalated it. Vance must have made another phone call over the weekend. They're putting their heaviest hitter on a first-time offense to make an example out of him. Ethan swallowed hard. What does that mean? It means they might ask the judge to revoke your signature bond and set cash bail, Marty said. They're going to argue you're a flight risk because your permanent address is technically in Chicago, even though the apartment burned down. My heart pounded. How much cash? Usually 10 grand for this level of felony. Jim, do you have 10 grand liquid today? I felt the blood drain from my face. I had about $400 in checking and the remaining $2,000 of Noah's money. I didn't have 10 grand. We'll argue it, Marty said quickly, seeing the panic in my eyes. Just keep your mouth shut and let me work. We walked into the courtroom. It was packed with people waiting for their cases to be called. We took a seat in the 2nd row. Across the aisle, I saw him, Terry Miller. He was sitting next to a man in a cheap suit. Miller was wearing a massive, exaggerated foam neck brace. He had a bandage over his nose, and he was glaring at Ethan with a smug, victorious sneer. At 9 a.m. sharp, the bailiff called for all to rise. Judge Harrison, an older woman with severe glasses, took the bench. They ran through 3 minor cases before calling Ethan's docket number. State of Wisconsin versus Ethan Harris, the clerk called out. Marty stood up, motioning for Ethan to do the same. They walked up to the defense table. I stayed in the gallery, my hands gripping the wooden pew in front of me so hard my joints ached. Your Honor, the chief deputy DA said, stepping to the podium. He was a slick-looking guy in his 40s. The state is charging 1 count of aggravated battery in a public place. We have a signed complaint from the victim, Mr. Miller, and video evidence of an unprovoked, brutal assault. We enter a plea of not guilty, Your Honor, Marty said loudly, cutting through the DA's theatrics. And we object to the characterization of unprovoked. We have submitted a motion regarding the preservation of secondary camera footage proving defense of a third party. The judge looked over her glasses at the file. Noted, Mr. Defense Counsel, state, what is your position on bail? The DA straightened his tie. Your Honor, given the violent nature of the attack and the fact that the defendant's primary residence is out of state in Illinois, we are requesting bail be set at $15,000 cash. $15,000. They were trying to lock him up today. Marty slammed his hand on the table. Objection. The defendant is a full-time university student with 0 criminal history. His apartment in Chicago recently suffered a catastrophic fire, which is why he is temporarily residing with his father, a lifelong Milwaukee resident, just 10 miles from this courthouse. He is not a flight risk. He has no ties to this community other than a father, the DA countered smoothly. He is a transient student facing significant prison time. The temptation to flee is high. Judge Harrison looked down at Ethan. Ethan stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back, his bruised face forward. He looked terrified, but he didn't flinch. Mr. Harris, the judge said, are you currently enrolled in classes? Yes, Your Honor, Ethan said, his voice remarkably steady. I am a senior at the Chicago Institute of Design. Your Honor, the DA interrupted. We have reason to believe the defendant is actually in the process of being medically withdrawn from that institution due to mental instability. The courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. I stopped breathing. The DA knew about the withdrawal. Marty spun around to look at the DA. What are you talking about? My client has made no such request. The DA pulled a piece of paper from his file and handed it to the bailiff, who walked it up to the judge. We received an email this morning, forwarded to our office by the defendant's mother, Sheila Harris, the DA said with a sickening smile. She states that she is processing a medical withdrawal today, citing the defendant's unstable mental state and violent tendencies. If he is not a student, he has no reason to return to Chicago and no professional ties holding him accountable. Sheila had done it. When she couldn't get through to Ethan or me, she had contacted the prosecutor's office directly. She had handed them the exact ammunition they needed to paint Ethan as a deranged flight risk, all to force him out of school so she could grab the tuition check. Marty looked back at me, his eyes wide. I shook my head in pure, white-hot fury. The judge read the email. She frowned. Counselor, is your client being withdrawn from his university? No, Your Honor, Marty said, scrambling. This is a hostile action by an estranged parent attempting to sabotage his education for financial gain. The defendant has not consented to any withdrawal. Be that as it may, the judge said slowly, setting the paper down. There is clearly instability in the defendant's living and educational situation. Given the severity of the charge, I cannot allow a signature bond to stand. She picked up her gavel. Bail is set at $10,000 cash. The defendant is remanded to the custody of the county sheriff until the amount is posted. Next hearing in 3 weeks. Bang. No, I whispered. 2 sheriff's deputies stepped up behind Ethan. They grabbed his arms. Ethan turned his head, looking back at me as they pulled his hands behind his back to cuff him. The panic finally broke through his calm facade. Dad, he yelled, his voice cracking as the metal cuffs clicked shut. I'll get you out, I shouted, standing up from the pew. Do not say a word to anyone. I'll get you out. They led him through the side door. It slammed shut behind him. I stood there in the gallery, the world spinning. Terry Miller laughed loudly from the other side of the aisle, high-fiving his lawyer. Marty packed his briefcase and walked back to me. He looked furious. I'm sorry, Jim. I didn't see that email coming. His own mother threw him under the bus. How long until they move him to the main block? I asked, my voice deadly calm. He'll be in intake processing for about 6 hours. Then they put him in general population. Marty put a hand on my shoulder. You need to find 10 grand, Jim. Fast. County lockup is no place for a kid like him. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Noah was standing as soon as the doors opened. He looked past me, expecting Ethan to walk out. When he saw, it was just me. His face collapsed. Where is he? Noah asked, his voice barely a whisper. They set cash bail? I said, grabbing his arm and pulling him down the hallway, away from the lingering crowd. 10,000. Sheila sent an email to the DA saying he was mentally unstable. Noah leaned against the marble wall, putting his hands over his face. Oh my God. Oh my God. They took him. They're not keeping him, I said. We don't have $10,000, Jim. My savings are gone. His accounts are frozen. I looked at the kid. He was shaking, on the verge of a complete breakdown. I have a house, I said. Noah looked up, his eyes bloodshot. What? I have a house, I repeated, pulling my phone out of my pocket. I bought it for 90 grand 20 years ago. It's paid off. I'm going to the bank right now to take out a home equity line of credit. Jim, you can't mortgage your house for bail money. If we lose the case, if Midwest Urban takes the civil suit, you could lose your home. It's just wood and drywall, Noah, I said, dialing my bank's local branch manager. Ethan is my home. Now come on, we have a lot of work to do. I drove straight to the bank. The branch manager, a guy named Dave, who had processed my initial mortgage 20 years ago, sat across from me in his glass-walled office. He looked at the numbers on his screen, then looked at me over his reading glasses. Jim, you own the house outright. A $10,000 line of credit is nothing against the equity. But at these interest rates, pulling cash for a short-term need, are you sure? Print the papers, Dave. He printed them. I signed my name 6 times. By 11:30 a.m., a cashier's check for $10,000 was sitting in my breast pocket. I walked out of the bank feeling a strange lightness. I had spent a decade working graveyard shifts to secure that deed, to make sure nobody could ever take the roof over my son's head, and now I was putting it right back on the table to buy his freedom. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Noah and I drove to the county lockup. The intake waiting room was a miserable purgatory of scuffed linoleum, crying babies, and the constant, depressing hum of fluorescent lights. Noah sat next to me on the hard plastic chairs. He didn't speak. He just stared at the heavy steel door that separated the waiting area from the processing block. It took 5 hours. 5 hours of watching the clock tick down, wondering what was happening to my boy on the other side of that wall. At 4:45 p.m., the buzzer sounded. The steel door clanked open. Ethan walked out. He was holding a clear plastic bag with his belt, his shoelaces, and his wallet. His face was pale, his eyes hollowed out. The purple bruise on his cheek looked even worse under the harsh lights. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning the crowd, until they landed on us. Noah stood up, but he hesitated. He looked at me, as if asking for permission, as if he still believed this was somehow his fault. Go get him, I said. Noah crossed the room. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arms around Ethan, burying his face in Ethan's neck. Ethan dropped the plastic bag. It hit the floor with a dull thud. He wrapped his arms around Noah, pulling him in so tight I thought he might crack the kid's ribs. Ethan closed his eyes, and I watched his shoulders heave. He was finally crying. I walked over, picked up the bag, and put a hand on Ethan's back. Let's go home. Tuesday morning, we started dismantling the traps they had set for us. First up was Sheila. At 8 a.m., Ethan sat at my kitchen table, my phone pressed to his ear. He had the university registrar on the line. My name is Ethan Harris, he said, reading his student ID number off his card. I need to revoke all FERPA permissions and billing access for Sheila Harris, effective immediately, and I need to flag my account for fraudulent activity. The woman on the other end typed something. Mr. Harris, we received an email regarding a medical withdrawal on your behalf. It's fraudulent, Ethan said, his voice hard. I did not authorize it. I am not withdrawing. If any tuition refund is processed and sent to that woman's address, I will hold the university liable for dispersing federal student loan loan funds without the primary borrower's consent. That got her attention. The phrase federal student loan funds works like magic on university bureaucrats. By 8:15 a.m., Sheila was entirely locked out of the system. She couldn't see his grades, she couldn't authorize a withdrawal, and she definitely couldn't touch a dime of his money. 10 minutes later, Sheila called my phone. I answered it and put it on speaker. "You think you're smart, Jim?" she shrieked. "You think you can just shut me out? I'll call the DA. I'll testify at his trial." "Sheila," Ethan said, leaning closer to the phone. She stopped. "Ethan, baby, I'm just trying to—" "Don't," he cut her off. "Don't ever call me baby again. You tried to ruin my life so you could steal my tuition money. You threw me to the wolves. If you ever contact me, Jim, or Noah again, I will file a police report in Indianapolis for identity theft regarding the credit cards you opened in my name 4 years ago. I still have the paperwork. Lose this number." He reached out and tapped the red button. The kitchen was dead silent. He let out a long exhale, pushed the phone away, and looked at Noah. One down. On Wednesday, the real counterattack began. Marty called me at work. I had picked up a day shift at the shipping center to make up for the time I'd missed. I stepped out onto the loading dock to take the call. "I found the dirt," Marty said, sounding like a kid on Christmas morning. "I told you Miller was a mechanic, right? Well, he's an under-the-table mechanic. Officially, Terry Miller hasn't worked a legitimate job in 4 years. He's currently drawing permanent disability from the state of Wisconsin for a severe lower back injury he sustained at a construction site in 2020. I leaned against the brick wall, the cold wind biting at my face. "He's defrauding the state. Big time," Marty said. "The guy claiming he can't lift more than 10 pounds without agonizing pain just tackled your son's boyfriend in a gas station parking lot. And here's the best part. Miller's civil lawyer filed a statement of damages claiming Ethan caused permanent loss of mobility and chronic neck pain. If Miller gets on the stand in a criminal trial and swears under oath that Ethan ruined his back, and I pull up his state disability records showing his back was already supposedly ruined 4 years ago, that's perjury. That's federal fraud. Does the DA know?" "Kovic is about to find out," Marty said. "I called a meeting for tomorrow at noon. Just me, Kovic, and Miller's billboard lawyer. Keep your phone on." Thursday at 12:45 p.m., my phone rang. It was Marty. "It's done," he said. The satisfaction in his voice was thick enough to cut. "Tell me." I sat down with Kovic and the personal injury guy. I handed them Miller's disability filings. I told them that if they push this to trial, my first move in discovery is to subpoena Miller's unrecorded income as a mechanic and report him to the state fraud division. I told them we have the tape of him starting the physical altercation, which means he's committing perjury on his police report. Miller's lawyer went pale. He knew his client was using him for a shakedown. "And Kovic?" Kovic tried to bluff, said Alderman Vance still wanted a conviction, so I dropped the second bomb. Marty chuckled, a low, gravelly sound. I pulled out the fire marshal's report. I explained exactly how Midwest Urban Holdings falsified a $48,000 lien against a college student to cover up their own code violations. Then I politely reminded Kovic that Midwest Urban is Vance's biggest donor. I asked him how it would look in an election year if the press found out Vance was using the DA's office to criminally prosecute a kid who just happened to be the victim of his top donor's slumlord negligence. I closed my eyes. The knot that had been sitting in my chest for 2 weeks finally began to loosen. "You cornered them." "I gave them an out," Marty corrected. "Miller drops the civil suit with prejudice. Kovic drops the felony charge entirely, down to a municipal citation for disorderly conduct. A ticket, Jim, $300, and it doesn't go on a criminal record. In exchange, we don't blow the whistle on Miller's disability fraud, and we don't go to the press about Vance and the landlord. What about the lien on Ethan's account?" "Already handled." Midwest Urban got a call from Vance's office 10 minutes after our meeting ended. They withdrew the lien, released the bank freeze, and cut a check for the $8,000 renter's insurance claim. It'll be in Ethan's account by Friday. "They just want you to go away." "We're gone," I said. "Marty, thank you." "Don't thank me, Jim. You paid my retainer. Just keep that kid out of gas stations." That night, the temperature dropped to 12 degrees. I was sitting in my recliner in the den, looking at the paperwork Dave from the bank had emailed me. The charges were dropped. The bail money would be refunded to the court, and the county would cut me a check in 4 to 6 weeks. I could pay off the credit line before the first interest payment even hit. The house was safe. I heard the sliding glass door open and close. I walked into the kitchen and looked out the window. Ethan and Noah were on the back deck. They were bundled up in heavy coats, standing by the railing, looking out at the dark, frozen expanse of the yard. Ethan had his laptop open, resting it on the wooden railing. The screen glowed in the dark. He was showing Noah something. I watched Noah lean in, look at the screen, and nod excitedly. He bumped his shoulder against Ethan's, a massive smile breaking across his face. Ethan wrapped an arm around Noah's waist, pulling him close, kissing the side of his head. I opened the sliding door and stepped out into the biting cold. "What are we looking at?" I asked. They both turned. Ethan didn't pull away from Noah. He just turned the laptop so I could see. It was a real estate listing, a small, 2-bedroom apartment in the Rogers Park neighborhood of Chicago. It had exposed brick walls, big windows, and hardwood floors. "The insurance money cleared," Ethan said, his voice steady, his eyes bright. "And with Noah's savings, we have enough for first, last, and the security deposit. We're going to apply for it tomorrow. It's only 3 blocks from the lake," Noah added, his eyes shining. "And it's completely separate from the university housing. No corporate landlords, just a private owner." I looked at the screen, then at the two of them. They had been through hell. They had been burned out, shaken down, arrested, and betrayed by blood. But standing there on the frozen deck, leaning against each other for warmth, they didn't look broken. They looked unshakable. "It's a good spot," I said, handing the laptop back to Ethan. "You'll need help moving the new furniture. I can borrow a truck from the warehouse." "You don't have to do that, Jim," Noah said quickly. "You've done enough." "I'm your family, Noah," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "That's what we do. We show up." Noah's breath hitched. He nodded, looking down at his boots, a small, grateful smile playing on his lips. Ethan reached out and gripped my shoulder. It wasn't the desperate, terrifying grip of a kid needing his dad to fix the world. It was a firm, solid hold, the grip of a grown man. "Thanks, Dad," Ethan said. "Don't thank me," I said, zipping up my coat against the wind. "Just make sure you check the wiring before you plug in the surge protector." Ethan laughed, a real, loud laugh that echoed off the frozen trees. Noah joined in, leaning his head against Ethan's shoulder. I left them out there on the deck, talking about paint colors and drafting tables, their voices carrying over the howling wind off Lake Michigan. I went back inside, locked the sliding door, and finally, for the first time in weeks, turned off the lights and went to sleep.